Okay, hopefully everyone, if you give me a thumbs up, just let me know that you're seeing the PowerPoint. That would be great. All right, wonderful. So Claire and I are going to tag team this section together. We're going to talk about overview and messaging of the death penalty repeal and bail reform bills. So I'm just going to start things off with talking about death penalty repeal, and then I will kick it over to Claire to talk about bail reform. So looking, at death penalty repeal bills, we know that the death penalty is a broken, flawed system. So we are extremely excited that there is a bipartisan team of legislators that have introduced legislation this legislative session to abolish the death penalty once and for all in Ohio. And those bills are Senate Bill 103 and House Bill 183. And essentially, both of these bills, they're companion bills. So they're identical in terms of the nature of the bills and what they're going to do. And that's going to be to abolish the death penalty in Ohio. So the bill removes the possibility of a sentence for death for anyone who has yet to be convicted. As I mentioned, we're really excited because there's a Senate bill, there's a House bill, and both of these bills have bipartisan support, as you can see with the joint sponsors. So in the Senate, Senators Steve Huffman and Nikki Antonio are leading the charge in this effort. And then on the House side, we have Representatives Gene Schmidt and Adam Miller. And just looking at the current status of these bills, Senate Bill 103 is in Senate Judiciary Committee, and House Bill 183 is in House Criminal Justice. So you heard Gary talk about those committees. They're the same committees that the bail reform bills are in. These bills were introduced at the beginning of March. They've both had hearings for sponsor testimony. And so now we're at the stage where we're waiting for the second hearing for proponent testimony. And we're really excited because that is happening on the Senate side in the Senate Judiciary Committee for SB 103 this week. And so I'm going to kick it over to Claire to talk about bail reform.
Excellent. Thank you, Sabrina. So bail reform is a lot more complicated. It's not an on-off switch. Are we going to, get rid of the death penalty or not? There are a ton of different ways to achieve bail reform, and there's a lot of different details. So if you are somebody who wants to dive way deeper into this with me, I am happy to be there for you, and I'm going to drop my information in the chat. We don't have time for that today, which I think is probably good because many of you could probably repeat my longer spiel at this point because so many of you have heard it so many times. But at a 50,000 foot level, what these bills do, and SB 182 and HB 315 are identical, just like the death penalty bills. They were the same bills introduced in both chambers. What these bills would do is, instead of having initial release decisions hinge on how much money someone has, can you afford to post your bond, it would instead hinge on, do you actually pose a threat? And what that means is there would be a presumption of release that everyone is released unless a judge or a prosecutor has a concern that someone poses a threat, in which case then those individuals would get a hearing. What's also really exciting about these bills is it then requires that for most crimes, those hearings occur within 48 hours, which is a lot faster than many jurisdictions in Ohio usually have those hearings. What I heard when I was in my small group, and also what I heard from Elizabeth when she was speaking about her personal experiences, is often people remain in jail for a long time before ever seeing a judge, and that can create huge personal hardship. So one of the main things that these bills would do is not only more quickly release those who don't pose a threat and who should never be in jail in the first place, but it also makes sure that those who might pose a threat actually get in front of a judge more quickly. It also then limits the ability to set financial conditions of release, like cash bail, to very specific circumstances. So to give the quick update, as Sabrina did with the death penalty bills and bail reform, it's SB 182 and HB 315. As I said, these bills would eliminate wealth-based detention by reforming our pretrial system. In the Senate, it was introduced by Senators McCauley and Steve Huffman, and in the House by Representative Leland and Hillier. It's a bipartisan bill. Representative Leland is a Democrat, and 43 different co-sponsors signed on in the House, including a ton of Democrats and Republicans. And in the Senate, while it's two Republicans who are the joint sponsors who introduced the bill, there are also Democratic co-sponsors. So again, what would these bail reform bills do? One, they would reduce Ohio's pretrial incarcerated population by a lot, because again, creating that release path so that people who don't pose a threat can be quickly released instead of remaining in jail because right now their release path is only if they have money. That would mean a lot more people go home more quickly instead of having to spend a handful of days in jail before they ever see a judge. It would also end wealth-based detention, because one of the limited circumstances under which judges would be able to continue to set cash bail is that they would have to do an ability to pay determination to make sure that the amount of that they're setting for cash bail isn't an amount that the individual can pay. It also promotes public safety. Right now, if you're really wealthy and really dangerous, you can usually go home in Ohio, and that doesn't really make sense. Instead, these bills create more opportunities for judges to step in to set financial conditions of release that would cause people to, have more opportunities to get set up to come back to court, and to, decrease public safety concerns, basically giving judges more of an opportunity to step in. It also would strengthen our communities because it wouldn't tear apart families unnecessarily just because people can't afford to post bond. And it would save the state big money. We did a fiscal impact analysis where we hired an expert economist, and he found that bail reform, like what's in these bills, would save Ohio up to $264 million each year. We can go into the next slide. Basically, this breaks down for you what these changes would be. Right now, so in red on the left, right now, if you are arrested, let's say for drug possession, likely the biggest determination of whether or not you're going to be home waiting for trial or you're going to be in jail waiting for trial is how much money do you have? The proposed system is not how much money, but do you actually pose a threat? Sounds like a pretty basic no-brainer. And that's what these bills would do. And it's how they would not only, help our communities by eliminating wealth-based detention, they would also promote public safety.
Thanks, Claire. And so we are going to transition from talking about the bills to talking about messaging. So how do we talk about these bills and really why are these issues important? And when we were looking at the death penalty repeal and bail reform, we saw that there are some common themes in terms of the messaging and talking points. So Claire and I, again, are going to kind of tag team as we go through some of these themes. So the first is just starting with racial bias. So on the death penalty side, we know that the criminal legal system is plagued with racial disparities, and the death penalty is no exception. So when we look at the stats, people of color make up 15% of Ohio's population and 56% of Ohio's death row. And then 75% of Ohio executions involve a white victim. So a defendant's race can have both implicit and overt effects on a person's sentence.
And unfortunately, that's the case with the pretrial as well. We know, and we actually did research on this in Ohio using Ohio-specific data, that people of color are more likely to get financial conditions of release compared with white people charged with the same crime. So you have two individuals charged with the exact same crime in front of you. Black individuals are more likely to have to post an amount of money before they can return home than white individuals, who are more frequently just given the opportunity to leave without posting any money. We also know that people of color get higher bond amounts. That for the exact same crime, one individual might have to post nothing or have to post $1,000, and a person of color would have to post more than that. And that is often seen in research across the country and unfortunately here in Ohio. We also know that the higher your bond amount is, the more likely you are to spend more time in jail.
And then the next theme, is the cost to taxpayers. So looking at this from a fiscal lens. So on the death penalty side, the death penalty is at least 3 times more expensive than any other sentencing option. And it's estimated that the death penalty trials cost Ohio taxpayers as much as $16 million per case. And that's due to a number of factors. And again, as we know, the death penalty is a broken system. It puts innocent lives at risk. That's an exorbitant amount of money that we are spending on a system that doesn't work.
And we also know, as I just said, that bail reform is our current cash bail system is incredibly expensive, and bail reform would save us a ridiculous amount of money. And that's because holding someone in jail unnecessarily costs a lot of money. And that's why bail reform would save up to $264 million each year in Ohio. And I'm about to drop the report so you can read more about that in the chat.
And the next theme that we have is innocence. So looking at the death penalty in terms of innocence and wrongful convictions. Since 1973, 185 innocent people have been exonerated from death row. And that's kind of looking nationally. And then when we're looking at Ohio, Ohio is home to 11 death row exonerees who collectively spent over 200 years incarcerated for crimes that they did not commit. Ohio has executed 56 people. So when we're looking at this, for every 5 people that Ohio has executed, 1 has been exonerated from death row. And that is just, when we're talking about this, the price and the cost of that, I mean, just from a moral perspective is just despicable. So, I think for this argument, when we're talking about innocence, the death penalty puts innocent lives at risk. And we know that both nationally and here in Ohio.
Yeah, and we know that there's also a huge innocence problem with people pre-trial, because we know that everyone who's in jail pre-trial is legally innocent, because they, by definition, if they're in jail pre-trial, have not been convicted of a crime. People who remain in jail pre-trial end up having worse case outcomes. They're more likely to get convicted, they're more likely to get sentenced to jail or prison, and their sentences are longer compared with those charged with the exact same crime who are able to purchase their pretrial release. There's a ton of reasons for this. People are more likely to agree to a plea deal. For example, if Sabrina and I were arrested for the exact same thing today, but I was going to wait for my trial at home, then I might feel pretty good about my chances. If Sabrina was going to remain in jail for the next 6 weeks to wait to demonstrate her innocence, but if she pled guilty today, she could go home. In a lot of cases, Sabrina's going to choose the option that would allow her to go home. Many times people don't have the privilege of fighting their case if they are going to be held in jail while they wait for that opportunity.
And then looking at this, both issues, Ohioans support death penalty repeal and bail reform. So looking at the death penalty side, looking at a recent statewide opinion poll of Ohio voters, 59% of Ohioans support replacing the death penalty with life in prison without the possibility of parole. And I think the important piece here is that the third bullet, this is not a bipartisan issue. That poll found, 69% of Democrats and 53% of Republicans support repeal. So this is overwhelmingly, majority of, across the aisle. So I think that's shown in the legislation, which is why we're really excited for this current push.
And luckily, same thing's true about bail reform. 75% of Ohio voters believe that Ohio's criminal justice system is in need of reform. And it was actually really fascinating because when we dove into what the details of that meant, a ton of people still agreed. 77% favored requiring a hearing on release conditions within 48 hours of detention, something that we're really excited that SB 182 and HB 315 requires. And 69% believe in creating a release path for most individuals to go home the same day they're arrested if they don't pose a threat. Again, something that these bills would do. Right now, instead, what it looks like is there's a release path for the wealthy, so that if you can post your bond, you get to go home. And if you can't, you're unnecessarily left in jail to languish.
So we went over, kind of the common themes across both issue areas, and then just wanted to also focus on, some talking points that are specific to the issue area. So for death penalty, looking at the first bullet, we've got victims' families. I think oftentimes there is, an argument made around that the death penalty is serving justice, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Capital punishment prolongs pain for victims' family members through re-traumatization. It's a lengthy process, and it holds out this false promise of healing through an execution. There's also, we talked a little bit about the racial disparities. There's geographic disparities as well. There's a small number of counties in Ohio that disproportionately use the death penalty system. And I've included just a stat around the top 5. The top 5 counties are responsible for 68% of all Ohio death cases. And this isn't just unique to Ohio. This is found nationwide in terms of this disparity. And then also, Ohio is functioning with an unofficial moratorium currently. We have not carried out an execution since 2018. Governor DeWine announced in early December of 2020 that he's extending the moratorium, unable to get the lethal injection drugs. So we're just saying, it's time to make this temporary moratorium permanent. And that's a big piece that we're talking about here in Ohio. And we're also seeing that nationwide. You know, there is a momentum for repeal. We just saw this in Virginia earlier this year.
Let's talk about specific things related to bail. So unnecessary jail time completely upends people's lives. People who remain in jail pre-trial are put at risk of losing their jobs, their homes, even custody of their children. When I talk to people, I even say, you know, if you were held in jail for 48 hours, would someone know to feed your pet? Would somebody be able to get into your house if police have your keys and know to feed your pet? After 48 hours, it's probably going to be a big problem. Your pet's going to be hungry. But after 5 days, after a couple weeks, circumstances are going to have turned pretty dire. And that's unfortunately what exists all the time in Ohio, where people are held unnecessarily and only the wealthy are able to buy their way out. Pretrial detention also leads to worse case outcomes, as I explained above. And this is a huge problem because it really makes a mockery of our whole criminal justice system, because it's clear that wealth and not culpability is what's shaping outcomes. And again, as I said up top, we need this to improve public safety. Currently, dangerous wealthy people can buy their freedom, while those who pose zero threat languish in jail unnecessarily. That does not help promote public safety. And in fact, we know that because being held in jail pre-trial creates such a long-term and destabilizing effect on individuals' lives, that it actually increases the likelihood that they'll commit poverty-related crimes later. Another way that our current system fails to keep us safe.
And so I think that that's all that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And just thank you so much. I'll drop my information in the chat if you have any questions around death penalty repeal legislation or messaging, and also check in on the chat. I still, after all this time, have not mastered the sharing of the screen and the moderating of the chat together, but thanks so much. And I'll just give it to Claire if there's any clues and thoughts.
Yeah, if you are one of those individuals who has not heard me go into a deep dive of every single thing that these bail bills do, I'm happy to do that with you. And again, I'll put my information in the chat if you'd like to continue this conversation. Thank you.